And welcome into the roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you. And we've been hearing a lot about the Mississippi River and the levels that it has reached at this point, those being lower, of course, not necessarily higher. But we've got two people here to talk about what the situation is and what it could possibly become in the course of the next few weeks or so. And hopefully we got some recovery. We have Pat Chambers joining us, the Chief Operations and Regulatory of the Mississippi Valley Division of the Army Corps of Engineers, and Dr. Sal Mercogliano, Associate Professor of History at Campbell University, joining us here as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. Pat, let me start with you, since you're kind of on the ground in this situation, or at least you're seeing it. What's the situation that we have right now going on with the Mississippi River?
Thanks, Bill. Glad to be with y'all today. Right now, we're experiencing low water, as you mentioned. We're looking, a lot of comparison between 88 and 2012. Right now, the historic low water, mark at Memphis gauge is the only one that we've gone below. But, we've got 7 dredging operations ongoing from St. Louis to Baton Rouge in order to keep up and continue moving traffic along the water. We use a mix of cutterhead dredges, dustpan dredges, which are pipeline discharge, and then mechanical, which is basically a backhoe on a barge where they scoop and dump it off outside of the channel. Right now barges, barge traffic is affected. The industry, the navigation industry, is having to reduce their draft and tow sizes in order to deal with the current river situation. And, and we are having some areas where they're running aground. Sometimes it's a little bit heavier tow than recommended or restricted to right now, but it's because those barges were already on the river trying to get, to their destination prior to the water falling out.
Gotcha.
Right now, we're looking at a 20. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. That's all right. Sal, this is not obviously an isolated system as we have it at the moment. Obviously, we've got other rivers in the world that are dealing with this kind of an issue.
Yeah, we're seeing this worldwide, and you're exactly right about that, Bill. Obviously, we're seeing it right now on the Rhine River. We're seeing it on the Plata down in South America, seeing it on the Yangtze River. And again, this is the inland waterway transportation systems that we rely on. Doesn't get a lot of attention, not very sexy at all. But when you look at the amount of grain, for example, right now it's harvest time. We're seeing grain coming down the Mississippi and its tributaries. This is really essential. And what this means is we're seeing backups down the entire supply chain system, where bulkers are waiting down in New Orleans to load at this moment. They're not getting the grain that they need. And most importantly, too, don't forget, those barges don't go back up the Mississippi River usually empty. They're going to be loading fertilizer. And if they can't get sufficient fertilizer up the river, that means we're not putting fertilizer in the ground for the next crop. And so this has kind of a domino effect. And remember, worldwide grain distribution is kind of in a lot of flux. We're already hearing about Russia wanting to stop the Ukrainians from exporting grain.
Yeah, it's definitely a serious issue worldwide there as well. Pat, let me turn back to you. You talked a little bit about barge traffic and obviously some barges being running aground. How is barge traffic being affected by these low waters? And is it something that's manageable, or is it something that is really kind of a very serious problem?
Well, it's a problem to the shipping industry, and just as the other caller stated, was it's got a lot of impact with trying to get the harvest out. Reducing the draft size, that means they have to light load the barges, to deal with the shallow water, and also reduce their tow size. Normal operation, they're moving 40 plus barge tows up and down this river, but during these conditions, they're having to reduce their tow size to 5 wide, 5 long, basically 25 barge tows. So that creates problems, not just, getting, on the river, but it's also causing problems at those ports and grain elevators where they're overloaded and not being able to get all of their grain out of those elevators into the barges for the reduced number of barges.
Gotcha.
Being able to move.
Yeah. Sal, looking at that, you already talked a bit about damage to the kind of the grain economy as this goes worldwide. What about rates? We already seen, at least on the Mississippi River, rates skyrocketing in areas where if you can't get it out, the rates just has gone, I think, 8 to as much as 20 times up.
Well, and it's not even just rates. I mean, you have inflation right now where the U.S. dollar is very strong, which is great, but it makes it very hard to purchase this American grain when it's coming out. And just to build on what Mr. Chambers said, he's exactly right. I mean, again, you got to think about a standard kind of towboat, 15 barge tow. You know, that's the equivalent of 216 rail cars, over 1,000 trucks. We can't shift this ashore. We have to be using the rivers to be able to do this. And as you minimize the number of barges coming down, what we're talking about is throughput. We're just not going to get the volume of traffic through the Mississippi that we usually do down to the ports in Louisiana to get out. And that means, again, what you're going to see is grain prices go up. We already saw that China is making a big play for soybeans right now. And I'll add one other problem to this is a problem we had earlier this year, which is the exact opposite, was too much water up in Canada. The Fraser River washed out the bridges that connected Victoria and the western British Columbia to the rest of Canada. And you still see to this day 20 to 30 bulkers waiting to load out of Western Canada right now to get across. So we're just seeing this escalation in price. And where this is particularly going to be damaging is in low income countries, you know, that are not, you know, mid to low range incomes that aren't going to be able to afford grain if they can even get a contract for it because they're being outbid by other countries.
Pat, let's look at kind of the solution and how we get out of this. Obviously, you need rain. That's basically the number one indicator of how this problem probably solves itself. But how much more can you do to keep the situation kind of afloat, not to use a bad pun, but also just to keep it running before we really absolutely need rain to fill the Mississippi River again?
Yeah, rain is the key. You know, but right now, you know, you asked if it's manageable. Manageable at the stages that we got and the current barge traffic that we're moving, we can manage it like I started earlier with the dredge operations that we've got going on, whether it's a cutterhead dredge, dustpan, or mechanical means, to move those shoaling or widen the channel in certain areas where they're having trouble. We've got, you know, we're keeping those dredges moving. Up and down the river, you know, working those sites as we're identifying them, running surveys to identify any other challenges. But then again, also working to keep the buoys in place so that the mariners at these, you know, extreme low water, that they know where that channel is, and that's a challenge as well. So we work with the Coast Guard, the industry, and you know, and the rest of the maritime community to, you know, to affect all of those efforts, surveys, identifying areas, the buoy placement, and then also dredging in order to keep it moving. Right now, based on the 28-day forecast, yes, it's manageable to keep moving the traffic that we are right now.
That's definitely good to hear. Just real quickly, before we let you go, how long can you keep it manageable without rain?
I believe through this event, we're confident that we're going to be able to keep moving traffic. You know, there are going to be some slowdowns or maybe even a closure for 12 to 24 hours, you know, where we have to get a dredge in to open that channel back up. You know, if a barge gets stuck or something like that, if they get out of shape, then that could cause another problem. But we're confident we're going to be able to keep it up through the event.
All right, excellent. That's great to hear. Sal, as you look at this from an economic perspective, as well as, you know, we kind of trim down our ability to export grain and obviously trim down the ability to get needed supplies back up the Mississippi River, what do you think the economic impact of this entire thing is going to be, first for the freight industry, but also for the country at large?
Well, I mean, obviously, we're seeing those freight rates go up. So obviously, we're seeing this demand to go. And so companies are doing it. But we've already seen major barge carriers like Ingram declare force majeure that they're not able to make their deliveries on time because of the situation. I think, you know, we've talked a lot about infrastructure. We talked a lot about reforming ocean shipping. I think we really need to be looking at the inland waterways and what kind of reforms do we need in our inland waterways. There's talk of siphoning off part of the Mississippi to funnel into the Colorado. We need to look at the economic impact that will have. What's our alternatives from going down the Mississippi with barges to maybe going up the Mississippi into the Great Lakes, into Lake Michigan, to load in bulkers going through the St. Lawrence Seaway? We need to be looking at alternative routes that we can examine. We're really at the mercy of rains in the Midwest for the lower Mississippi below St. Louis. You have the dam and lock system above that. And again, I keep going back to this. Really, we need some sort of national strategy, some sort of direction in which way we want to use our inland waterways.
And it's such a volatile situation. As you mentioned just earlier this year, we had too much rain. And I don't know, my dad we grew up on the Mississippi River in Mississippi. And so he's seen the ebbs and flows of how that river can do. And of course, I don't think he ever saw what we're seeing here today. But it's certainly an interesting situation to keep control of. And of course, Pat, you and the Army Corps of Engineers doing the best job you can to keep things manageable. Thanks so much for your work there as well. Both of you, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, we will take a short break. We'll come back with more Freightwaves Now after